Welcome to today's Oneonta Presidential Candidates Forum, and we're very pleased to have all of you here. And in fact, we have presidents from Kowal, from Delhi, from Empire State, from Oneonta, from Stony Brook, and we have two members from the statewide executive board. So we welcome you all who are in attendance with us today. We'll have a larger audience because we will be posting at least a portion of today's forum. The purpose of the forum, of the candidates forum, is to facilitate a campaign, whatever its final outcome, which elevates discourse, which respects diverse views, and prepares UUP for the serious challenges ahead. Appreciation is due to both candidates for undertaking the difficult and important task of running a statewide UUP presidential campaign. This forum, all those who were contemplating running for statewide president were invited to participate, and it is indeed confined to those running for statewide president. Format will be that each of the candidates will initially speak for 15 minutes. By a flip of the coin, Wes Kennison from Geneseo will be speaking first. Fred Kowal from Kowal will be speaking second. They will each have 15 minutes in their opening statements. And other than doing as I just did, identifying their names, their campuses, which I have done, I'll leave it to them to the extent that they wish to share biographical information. After the conclusion of the 15-minute statements, and they'll be doing that from a lectern, they will each have a 5-minute response time. And then we will open it for questions. At that point, by their choice, they'll take the questions from the sitting down just to save time. We will run either until there are no further questions or until an hour and a half has transpired from the time that we started. So without any further ado, and I will give the candidates a 5-minute warning and a 2-minute warning in terms of time, but without any further ado, Wes Kennison from Geneseo.
Thank you very much, Bill. I'd like to thank the Oneonta chapter, certainly for hosting, and for Rob and Bill for working through all the things that needed to be worked through to make this happen. I think it's really, really, really important in a union that has such a history and identity of being democratic, small d, in the way that we operate, that we have opportunities to do these kinds of things. I also want to thank all of you. I know that on a beautiful day like this, there are many other things that you could be doing right now, and the fact that you come out and join us for this conversation, I think is especially important. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, and I want to tell you a little bit about where I think UUP could go in terms of its interface with the outside world, and then I want to finish up by talking a little bit about UUP internally and some things that I would prioritize. I was a couple years ago walking up a steep hill in Haiti with some students on the way up to inspect a water source for a hospital project that our partners were working on. And coming down the hill was a mule and a farmer, and the mule was loading down with mangoes. And so we sort of stopped to chat for a second, so I was scratching the mule's ears a little bit, and I managed to say in my worst possible Creole, pretty good mule. And the farmer looked at me and said in absolutely perfect English, he said, yes, I drive a hybrid, it's more efficient. I'm your mule, okay, I'm a hybrid. And I think if I'm sort of reflecting a little bit on who I am and why, what I think I could bring to the office, I've got to emphasize that point. To begin with, the job that I have right now at SUNY Geneseo is I teach in the English department, and the foreign language departments. And I do a lot in the general education humanities and get involved in a lot of those sorts of conversations. But the other half of my job is running study abroad programs, primarily when the courses that happen when faculty gather a group of students and travel to some interesting part of the world. I oversee that particular program. from that point of view then, even though I'm sort of listed as academic faculty at Geneseo, my actual work experience is quite literally half academic and half professional in terms of what we have to do. And in the study abroad office, as you may know from your own campuses, the study abroad office really works like a small university itself in the sense that you have to interact with everybody. There's no office on the campus that you don't work regularly with, because when your students are studying abroad, the study abroad office is their contact with everything that happens back on campus and all the resources that are there. So in that sense, I'm a hybrid. I'm a hybrid academic and a hybrid professional. I'm also a hybrid in the sense that I spent much of my career at Geneseo, which now goes back in excess of 25 years. I spent much of my career as a part-timer teaching, and that means that I had a significant amount of my life that took place off campus. I had a whole sort of professional life and existence that took place beyond campus, in the sense that I've owned a business for the last 20 years. I have been involved in a variety of activities. I actually served as a college chaplain at Geneseo back in the 80s for 9 years. I've had a variety of different kinds of teaching experiences, including one time I got to teach Introduction to Philosophy at Groveland Correctional Facility. That was a life-changing experience. By the way, the guys there taught me the definition of philosophy that I use to this very day. Philosophy is the art and science of trying to figure out who's lying to you. And in that sense, I find it a very practical, useful, feet-in-the-mud kind of enterprise. I also was involved, have been involved all my life in statewide politics in terms of working on various campaigns. I ran a congressional campaign supporting one of our faculty members, as a matter of fact, who took on Tom Reynolds, who was at the time the sitting minority leader of the assembly. And it was a tough race in a very conservative district. We lost, but we fought a noble fight. I've also been involved. I ran Hillary Clinton's campaign in Livingston County when she ran for Senate the first time, when people were painting "Hillary Go Home" on their barns. That was an interesting experience as well, but I got to know her in that process from the many times that she came to our part of the state. I got to know both of our senators very well, and actually Geneseo alumni are very high-ranking staff people in both of their offices. My state senator, his parents live in Geneseo, and they have a very, very, very large dog, and who's very elderly, Guinness, and my wife is their primary dog sitter. And so I don't have to try real hard to communicate with my state senator either. I'm sort of part of that culture. But also what happened during that course of time, almost through no fault of my own, is I got elected Geneseo Town Supervisor, where I served 2 terms. And I also, in Livingston County, we have that funny kind of form of government called County Board of Supervisors. So if you're the town supervisor, you're also the county legislator. And from that point of view, I got very involved in statewide organizations advocating for local government, and that's a point that I'm going to return to in the next section here. So one of the things I'm going to say is I've had a lot of different kinds of experience that I bring to the table here, including 25 years or so being very active in UUP. I've been formerly part-time and now contingent employment rep from Geneseo. We also have I've also served on our executive board for many years, and I served on the statewide executive board for 2 terms, and I served on 2 negotiating teams. So I've been representing our constituents here in a very sort of wide range of places. I'd like to talk a little bit about what all of that means in terms of where I'd like to go. There's no question about the fact that we face very challenging times. This was a very tough contract negotiation we just came through. It doesn't have to be that point doesn't have to be labored. As we go forward, I think that obviously there's in terms of our political outreach and our political presence, we need to obviously shore up all of the kinds of stuff that we've been doing that's been successful. I also think we need to move into some new areas. And one of the areas that I've been interested in some time, in terms of building a brand new set of allies in our struggle, is to ask you to consider at your local campuses what is your relationship with your local government, okay? That is to say, I know each of our county governments have economic development offices that are very sensitive about bringing jobs into their communities and protecting jobs in their communities. And one question is, are we on their particular radar? Do they see our jobs as equal to being those other jobs? And if not, why? I think that we need to, what I would like to propose is, if I become UUP's president, I would really like to see a statewide plan that would involve a data template where we could accumulate a sort of standard set of facts at each of our campuses in terms of how we interact and impact the local community. And by the way, I know from my own experience working on both sides of that discussion, it's very complex and it's very interesting, and we aren't even beginning to talk about it now. But to be able to have, for each campus to have its own set of data which can be continually updated, but then again a narrative which, and this is one of my key points here, and I'm going to return to this many times throughout the campaign, that seeks to talk about the unique nature of each one of our campuses and the unique relationship that each one of our campuses has to the local community that surrounds it, and the unique services that each one of our campuses provides in terms of building a better New York State. This, I think, is a really important feature of what I like to do, and let me tell you why. If you look at something like Open SUNY, okay, if you look at something like Open SUNY, you see a series of things out there that all have at least one common thread that runs through them. Okay, if you're talking about massive online courses, if you're talking about 3-year degrees, if you're talking about distance learning, if you add a lot of those things up, one of the things that recurs throughout that is the notion that the place where you are doesn't really matter in what you learn and how you learn it. That is to say, we're in a time right now where there seems to be kind of an effort to subtract place from the learning equation. Now, I work in a study abroad office, and so the very premise on which we do our job is that the place where you go matters in terms of what you learn and how you learn it. That's what we do for a living in study abroad. And it's time, I think, that we really begin to look at our own campuses in the same way. That the place where people come matters, and each one of our places has a unique identity, whether it's a campus or whether it's a hospital, and that unique identity, I think, needs to be respected and needs to be part of our regular message. I think in UUP now we are very good at telling people what we want. I think we are not so good at telling people who we are and why we matter. I think those are very, very important things. And there are a number of other issues I'd like to get into. I hope we can get into, I think we're probably going to get into some of those in the question and answer, and I look forward to that. But that to me is a foundational principle in terms of our public communication strategy and fundamental to our political strategy going forward. It's a piece that I think that we need to expand much further than what we're doing now. In terms of internally in the union, I think that this event is a really good example of the way that we need to go. And I think that the president of UUP can be a real leader in not only sort of ensuring that policies and procedures promoting democratic culture in our union are as effective as they can possibly be, but also that there's a culture of democracy that develops, okay? So not just in terms of making sure that we have a very clear set of guidelines governing these events. We don't want to get to this point where we're saying we're protecting democracy in the union by wiping it out because we think it's going to be somehow either unfair or asymmetrical in some kind of way. I think that we need to look carefully at that issue. I think that also just in terms, some examples of some policy things that I'd be very, very interested in pursuing. When I was in elected office, and the public policy, or in the open meetings law sort of governs how you run meetings, okay? And I know that in the public sector, executive session has a very much tighter definition than UUP has, okay? I think that we need to retain some flexibility there, but I think I would like to see in the executive board a tighter definition of executive session. I would like to see, in a sense, I think, a culture where we can really respect the diversity of opinion that can be expressed in public debate. I'd like to see extended question-answer opportunities at the delegate assemblies for people to come to the microphone and engage in that kind of a debate. We're an academic union. We kind of need to do that. That really is our identity, is who we are. And I think that that's important. So when we get into this wide range of issues that are in front of us, whether they are privatization or technology or shared services, we're talking about the issues that our retirees are facing in terms of the difficulties that they face and the kind of legislative strategies that we need to take their back. I think we need to make sure that the outreach committee is fully functional and fully engaged in those issues and fully empowered to act and develop those kinds of strategies. Knowledge is power, and we're the people that understand that fundamental truth.
1 minute.
What I'd like to do in terms of wrapping up is that, and I think this goes to my point about the culture of democracy here in UUP. I think that, as maybe you've sort of noticed in my personal statement, my friend Dante Alighieri talks about sort of political gossip and petty bickering in politics as being a kind of form of gluttony, that we eat it like cheesy, we eat it like junk food. And I think that this particular campaign, I think, can be very crucial to the future of our union, because among the list of people that I really want to thank here today is I want to thank Fred. I think Fred's a good guy. I think Fred and I can have a really good debate going forward. And one of the questions I get asked most often when I'm talking to members is, hey, if you win this election, what are you going to do with Fred? And my answer to that is very clear, that when you run for office, you talk to a lot of people, you learn a lot of things, you develop a lot of skills that need to be put at the force of the union. If I win the election, I want Fred to be a full partner, and I will pledge that if Fred wins the election, I'm going to be reaching out the next day to say, we'll work on this political project that I'm talking about. I think that we can shake hands on that, and I know Fred's on board with that too. That once this election is over with, we got a lot of stuff on the table. We got a lot of stuff we got to move fast on, and I think the two candidates for president need to lock hands instead of horns and work together to make that happen for us. So thank you very much for your time. Appreciate you coming out. I look forward to the question and answer.
Thank you, Wes. Our next speaker for Kowal of Kowal. Brett.
Thanks, Bill, and let me echo Wes and thank you all for coming. And it is an indication of the interest, I think, in a very historic election that we're facing. And actually, it's really good to be back in Oneonta. I actually go back a ways with a number of you. There was a time years ago when I was an adjunct instructor here in the political science department, and it was a lot of fun working with you folks. And actually, more recently, in February, I was here and very warmly received by colleagues and friends when I spoke about Abraham Lincoln and his role in the emergence of working class activism. It went really well, and I think the event itself is testimony to how chapters can work together. In order for the union to work, what we do need is chapter leadership, like my friend Bill Simon, and other chapter presidents have done so well, and that is to use all of our energy, our solidarity, our strength, to continue to be a vital part of the workers' movement in America. That's what we're a part of. That's central to what we are. And we need to draw from the energy of all of our members, our newest members, the commitment of those who have been long-term members, and the wisdom and experience of our retired members to continue to build UUP. And it's really crucial now because you all know this. We are facing unprecedented challenges as a union. From the threat of privatization of the health science centers, most notably at Downstate Medical University, to constant cuts in the budget and in state support for public higher education. From the imposition of shared services, where there was absolutely no consultation with UUP, there was no coordination with local institutions or local communities, to cuts in systems administration, programs eliminated at Albany and at Geneseo, from the aggressive pursuit of online education without the least bit of input from UUP or the faculty of SUNY, to the unilateral increase of workload at my home campus at Kowal. This is a tough time to be in a public sector union. It's a tough time to be in a working class. But it is the best time, I would argue, for UUP to rediscover our solidarity, re-energize our presence in communities across New York State, and reclaim our central role in the workers' movement and the progressive movement in this nation. It's where we belong. The challenges are real, they're serious, our response must be just as serious, sweeping in scope, and focused clearly on the future for all our members and the society we serve. Now, when the UUP delegates vote for a new president in Albany on May 4th, we will do so at a really historic crossroads in the history of our union. First, it'll be the first time we're voting for a union president where there's no incumbent in something like 20 years, so it is unusual. Second, the person chosen will be leading this union through these uniquely difficult times, while also preparing, along with the members, the delegates, the officers, a very different kind of UUP to face the future. It's a union, I think, that needs to be able to be very, very agile in responding to multiple crises and to exert power in a variety of different ways. We have to be proactive, and in my observation, that's been a failing over the last few years. We have to forge our own vision for SUNY's future. That has been lacking as well. We are educators in this university, and we have to act like that as unionists as well. We are the stewards of this university, the keepers of the sacred mission for our students, those we teach now, and those who will join us in the future. Now, I believe that my experiences as a chapter president for nearly 12 years have tried and tested me with the types of unique challenges we face throughout our union today. Downstate Medical Center has already suffered the loss of jobs, union jobs, UUP colleagues, brothers and sisters. And this drive for privatization and the elimination of union jobs has also become part of SUNY discussions regarding Upstate Medical University. And like I said, at system administration as well. Now, as a UUP leader, I have faced such threats. In the mid-90s, there were plans on the table to close all 5 ag and tech colleges, as we were known then. This would have also included, obviously, massive retrenchments. Now, thanks to extensive and intensive advocacy with our allies in the legislature, the colleges were saved. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But the budget cuts that followed the saving of the campuses were extremely severe. Here's what happened at Kowal. In January of 1996, the president announced that 10% of our academic staff was going to be retrenched. 10%. As chapter president, my first response was to immediately go to the media to argue in defense of my colleagues and members and draw public attention to what was clearly administrative incompetence. It was a controversial step to take, but I believe that desperate times demanded a desperate response. Now, at the same time, I was willing and did meet with the president of the college to convince him to delay implementation of retrenchments, especially for those on term appointments. As you might imagine, those meetings were a little tense. But in time, the tireless work succeeded and not a single colleague ended up losing his or her job. So for me, when I hear about campus closures or massive retrenchments, it resonates. It's real, and it's a challenge I've faced. Now, I've got materials related to the specifics of the struggle on my website, and I encourage you to examine those. There you will see the difficult challenges we faced as a chapter, the aggressive steps I took to defend our members, and how those members still feel about the work I did on their behalf. To put it simply, it remains my proudest moment as a union activist and leader. Fast forwarding, in 2011, Kowal was targeted with shared services. As I look over at John Taylor, my partner in crime over there at Delhi. For us, shared services is not a strange experiment without real meaning or a bizarre idea that will die out. No, it's real. It has led to increases in workload for professionals and academics, resulting in the filing of an improper practice charge by UUP against the administration. At the same time, during the last 6 months, we in the chapter have pursued negotiations with administration to attempt to reach a resolution to this violation of our contractual rights. Shared services has also meant that we deal with a large set of administrators who are rarely present on either campus, it seems like, complicating the necessary element of labor management meetings. Nonetheless, through the negotiations to save our retrenched colleagues, the present efforts to defend our established workloads, and monthly labor management negotiations, I've learned the art of bargaining. Not often from a position of strength, but always in defense of the interests of our members. It's a skill that I will call upon, if elected, to ensure that SUNY administrators, legislators, and those in the governor's office are fully aware of the power and determination of this great union and its 35,000 members. But as I'm sure you know, the power we have in negotiating at the statewide level and at the chapter level is a function of how involved and active our membership is. In my years as chapter president, my priority has always been to build and energize the membership. At present, we have increased our membership to nearly 100% and are activating those members through a newly created departmental and professionals representation system. In my years as chair of the statewide membership committee and then as statewide membership development officer, my focus was the same. As MDO, in my first term, I visited every chapter, listening to chapter leaders, offering assistance, and literally going door to door at times to sign up fee payers. However, if this union is to make this vital work of chapter building a true priority, then we as a union must make the membership development officer a full-time position. I would work with the delegates energetically to make that change a reality. Along with the recreated full-time MDO, all other statewide officers will be part of our common efforts to build UUP at the grassroots for the future. Further, I also promise you that if I'm elected president, I will bring to that position the energy and drive that has marked my work throughout my life on behalf of progressive causes. From my time working in soup kitchens in Northeast DC, to the years I spent on the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana, from the years as UUP leader at both the chapter and state level, to days spent walking the streets of Scranton, Pennsylvania and Youngstown, Ohio on behalf of Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. It is that commitment to the full realization of a just and equitable society founded on the inalienable rights of labor in all its forms that drives me to continue to fight. Whether it's at a meeting, at a local legislator's office, like Jim Seward's, which is right around the corner here, a statewide exec board meeting, a labor management meeting, or answering a question from a member. The work is continuous, the cause is just, and it demands this level of energy and focus. And to what end will I bring this drive and focus if I'm elected president? My vision of UUP is a union that is powerful, with strength and resilience at the grassroots. To become such a union, again, we must activate and engage that union of 35,000. I will be a president who seeks out our members. I will not be a president trapped in Albany. Our work in Albany is central, especially in working with the legislature and the executive branch. I'll discuss that in a second. But we must never forget that the roots of our power is in the chapters. If elected in my first year, I will visit each chapter and listen to the membership, whether they are fee payers or full members. I will work with chapter leaders to reach out and activate those members. UUP will have regional meetings to facilitate the formation of chapter-to-chapter links for everything from advocating at the district level to sharing events, as was done in the response to Hurricane Irene up in the Schoharie Valley, or with Superstorm Sandy on Long Island and in the 5 boroughs of New York City. We at the chapter level oftentimes feel very isolated and overwhelmed by the challenges we face. Well, I foresee a leadership of UUP with a team of officers in the exec board that together create the means by which chapters grow closer together to ensure that all members feel connected to their union and all it does for us all. This work at the chapter level must include the long-term vision and experience of our retired members. They carry with them the wisdom from the earliest years of our union through many struggles. To not draw on such wisdom would be a terrible mistake. I also see a union which is powerful again in the political realm. We in the union movement face hostility at times from both political parties. It's imperative that our advocacy efforts respond to this reality by forging bonds with legislators who are our friends and supporting candidates who, if elected, would be our friends. As UUP president, I would reconstitute our advocacy efforts so that we take advantage of close relationships forged by chapters and chapter leaders with local legislators, wherever they are forged. All our work doesn't have to come from a few individuals in Albany because our power in real terms comes from outside Albany. Over the years of my involvement in UUP, I have worked extensively with legislators going back to the early 1990s. Presently, my emphasis has been on district lobbying. Over the past few months, thanks to the initiative and cooperation of chapter presidents at Cortland, Delhi, at Oneonta, we now present a united front when meeting with local legislators, especially Senator Jim Seward. And he fully understands our issues and concerns. In January, we brought to him our concerns about RAM. I urged him to take action to stop this plan, based on the position that RAM represents a change in the mission of the State University of New York, which is the prerogative of the legislature, not the chancellor. He promised he would discuss things with Ken Laval, the senator from Long Island, and the chancellor, and they did. And as we all know, RAM is off the table, for now. We have to maintain those contacts and that work with all our allies. And the regional model of advocacy, along with the building of local government coalitions in support of SUNY, would be priorities in my presidency.
2 minutes.
I foresee a great future for us, with alliances we have already created and will create for that future. I also foresee a UUP which takes the lead in attacking the injustices faced by our contingent colleagues, especially those who are academics and professionals working part-time. I've already begun discussions with management at Kowal how the contract, if ratified, will impact the compensation of adjunct faculty and professionals working part-time. I've made it clear that all those gains must be carried out in this contract, and in fact, as UUP president, my plan would be to work closely with all chapter leaders, providing them with the authority to negotiate at the chapter level for increases in salaries, hopefully prior to the implementation of raises guaranteed through the contract, thereby providing a much more livable and just salary for our colleagues. In closing, I ask for your vote. I promise you that I will always be open and honest in dealing with the challenges we face. Never avoided a fight, and sometimes those stances I've taken haven't been popular with colleagues at Kowal School or in UUP generally, but in the end, they reflect the values that I have, core values, about the nature of the workers' movement in America and around the world. And they have been displayed in my work as chapter president of Kowal School, and they would be should I be president of UUP. I assure you, I promise you, I will always use the powers of this office only for the best interest of all of our members. That's why our union exists, and that's why I hope to serve you as our next president. Thank you.
Thank you. Wes, we could hold our applause to the end for all candidates. And there'll be ample time at the end to share your applause in unison. That, Wes, you have 5 minutes for response.
My response is, I think that's great. I think everything in there I think is on the list of things that we need to do. I think the question is how do we proceed? I think one of the things that's very important when we engage the powers that be in Albany, when we engage folks, is learning to speak the language that they speak and learning to understand the things that that make them respond and that make them wish to get on our team. When it comes to even I think one of the issues in the last contract negotiation, I heard Jamie's description of how negotiations got started. I think there were two things that were going on there. One of which was a kind of diminished respect, I think, that we were receiving in terms of the discussion. And we have to ask ourselves, how do we regain that respect? But also, I think there's just simply a teaching function, and I think a function that we are all very good at doing in terms of figuring out what the legislature has to know, what the governor has to know, in order to be able to help us do the things that we need to do. I think that we need to sort of learn to master the language of the world beyond the campus. And I think that's something that I would bring to the process here. I would like to see us with, in terms of forging these relations with local government, when we look at things like shared services, we look at things like what's happening in technology and open SUNY like that, there are ways of doing those things which grow the pie. And there are ways of doing those things which shrink the pie. One of the things, for example, that's sort of materializing our area, and I'm sure you've probably seen it in your area, is high schools that are having a very difficult time offering foreign language opportunities for their students because they can't staff the number of languages that they would like to have. And so we've been involved in some discussions at Geneseo in terms of reaching out and doing that kind of shared service that grows the pie. It sort of expands the services in terms of what we do, and it provides opportunities for our members. I think there's a number of ways in which we need to start talking about those relationships. One of the things you have to remember is each of our SUNY campuses was the fundamental idea of arranging the campus the way it were was to geographically distribute the benefits of SUNY throughout the state. We have students who are out doing really front-end and very important research for local governments and local businesses, people serving as interns, all sorts of ways in which we're resources. But I think one of the most important ones, and I think we overlook this sometimes, is that if you take your alumni directory and look up your own zip code, you'll see the number of people who have degrees from your institution who live in this area because they came here as students. They said, this is a place where I find quality of life. This is a place where I want to stay and start my business. This is a place where I want to come and bring those skills that I brought. There's a wide variety of ways in which we really need to make that case that we are inextricably connected to the place where we are and to the quality of life in those places. And I think that if we can make that case, it strengthens our ability to do all of these other things. I really do think that particular sort of approach is going to serve us very well going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Fred, 5 minutes.
There's there's a couple other things that I wanted to mention that couldn't work into 15 minutes. We're teachers. We think we're paid by the word, right? That's what I was telling my students when they start fidgeting that, time's up. Can we go now? No, I'm not finished. I still have a few words left to use. One of the things that I spent a lot of time over the last 2 years, both lobbying at the district level and advocating at the district level and in Albany. And our primary focus was on full funding, reinstating the funding that was cut for the health science centers. And it was a tough fight, and in the end, the most recent budget that was passed allocated a $28 million bump to the budget for the health science centers. Now, of course, there's a couple of dangers in this that we all have to be aware of. One is that money, the $28 million, will be divided amongst the 3 campuses. More important, the health science centers. More importantly, now remember, Downstate Medical University faces severe budgetary problems brought about by, once again, incompetent management. The other part of it, though, is that $28 million comes from the deficit reduction portion of our tentative agreement. That's where the money comes from. That means that there are campuses, and campus presidents, more importantly, all over SUNY, who really, really don't like the idea that what we, labor, are going to be given up through this contract is going to be taken away from those campuses and put into the health science centers. This is classic divide and conquer strategy, and you can see it coming, where faculty will be informed that resources are being lost to benefit the hospitals. What we as a union must have is the grassroots power to resist the temptation of succumbing to that divide and conquer strategy. We have really got to get past the divisions that have marked too much of our history. Those divisions, whether it's between professionals and academics, between the contingents and full-time folks, between campus types, all of these divisions destroy us from inside. We face enough challenges outside. The last thing we need to be doing is turning on each other, whether it's over very scarce resources or against each other for own political gain. And I applaud Wes's comments. I think that this campaign could very well set the template for how we need to go forward. Also in terms of communicating openly and directly with our membership, one of my pet ideas is new technologies. As we bring in new staff, new employees, and at Kowal, we're hiring 25 new faculty members, which is great. This is a new generation of academics. This is a new generation of folks, young folks, for whom social media is a constant companion. This is something that UUP needs to be on the cutting edge as well. There needs to be the utilization of social media, whether it's Twitter, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Facebook, as a way where members can constantly interact with the leadership of the union and with chapter leadership. My focus on chapter building and membership building is to go where the members are. We need to reach to their interests, not sit back and wait for membership to come to us, because they won't. We need to go to them, reach them where they are, speak to them in their language, and also in the communication means that they're presently using. Thanks.
Norm, could I ask you if you could please move the podium to one of the wings? Thank you. The next section will be questions and answers. A few ground rules. Candidates have felt that in terms of time, they'll remain sitting. Questions are free and unfettered. The only rule is, of course, to maintain civility. And the second rule would be is that so this doesn't become interrogatory, that we will try to disperse the questions. So, in other words, one person doesn't get to ask a series of questions and that there's a democratic opportunity. So, the first question? Tom?
Hi.
Can I just say one thing before you do so? That no matter whom a question is directed to, one or both candidates have an opportunity to respond to it, either to the question asked or to the response made by the other. Sorry, Tom?
So this is to both of you, and thanks for taking the time to meet with us and obviously all the rest of us through the wonders of the media here. Both of you have enjoyed great success as presidents at your local chapters. How can you take those successes and scale them up to the statewide level? Or what problems do you see, or what strategies do you have to take those successes and scale those up?
Is that directed to both candidates?
Both candidates.
Yeah, how do I want to do the...
Well, why don't we, why don't we start with Wes in the next shot? You go first, Wes.
Okay, great. One thing, I'll correct the record on that. I've actually never served as chapter president at Geneseo.
Okay, so just the successes that you've experienced through your work at your chapters.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that certainly is has been very important for us is the obviously over the long haul has been since the stabilization of the part-time members and the contingent members, and also in the sense the sort of equal opportunities provided for those folks in terms of participating in campus governance. One of the things we had to get involved in several opportunities on academic freedom issues and in a sense getting people involved in voting department meetings and that kind of thing. So I think that part of it I think has been very positive at Geneseo. Obviously at Geneseo we're hurting very badly right now over the deactivation of our 3 departments, and that came out of the blue. And I think that we feel that very deeply. And one of the things that I would certainly pledge as UUP president is I think that there really needs to be, every single campus president and local chapter and hospital chapter needs to know that the president of UUP has their back and will be there for them in those moments to bring all of the resources to bear. But not the least of which is the notion that we really need to be constantly communicating to our members that we care, that we're involved, that we understand what's going on, and that we care. I would say that one of the things that's very interesting in Geneseo, I think, is a place very much like Oneonta in terms of the interaction of the campus with the local community, and I think that there's lots of interesting ways in which that has happened. In my own job right now as study abroad director, I'm very proud of the fact that in our department, we've actually removed some of the barriers for participation in our summer study abroad programs, which actually are opportunities to put real money in the pocket of our members, and they're opportunities to give people their resume building opportunities. If you're a part-timer, if you're a contingent person, or if you're a full-time tenured faculty, you have an equal shot at running the program. You have to put your group of students together and come forward. We've also opened up for the first opportunity for professionals to travel with our study abroad programs and be able to be treated with full opportunity there, so they can take 3 weeks out of the office without taking vacation time and be able to come and participate in a study abroad program. In those sorts of ways, I think that we've been able to those exemplify, I think, ways in which we've been trying to break down those barriers and weave those various parts of the campus together into one community. And I think, given especially in the small rural campuses, that's an extremely important project, given the fact that you either hang together or you hang separately.
Thank you. Frank?
Yeah, I think that because of the 12 years that I've been a chapter president, I've encountered a lot of the issues, in fact some of them several times. In the early to mid-90s, I mentioned the planned closure of our campuses. There was actually plans back then to privatize the hospitals, and we fought that off. SUNY, UUP being the leading force to oppose that. So there is the exposure, previous exposure to the issues. Secondly is the experience of dealing with them at the chapter level and having to respond as a chapter president, but with the team on the exec board. And for instance, last year, there was, as a result of shared services, the president that we share with campus at Delhi, decided that there were too many departments at Kowal and wanted to eliminate half of the department chairs and half the departments and merge them. And also, the means to doing this, classic management technique, was to put together a faculty committee that would evaluate whether or not programs should be saved, increased, cut, or eliminated. Cut in terms of budgetary. Now, we faced a quandary. These are our colleagues who are making these decisions that would impact the employment status of other colleagues and UUP members. What I did was I requested from UUP the founding documents of UUP, which includes the statement that at no point may a UUP member work in any fashion that undermines the job and the income of a fellow UUPer. I wrote a memo to the members of the committee. I excerpted those paragraphs, calmly but directly indicated that they needed to move very carefully in this work. There was an angry response from administration and labor management for mine having done this. As I explained to the president when she said, "Why would you do this?" I said, "Because it's my job. I'm chapter president, and it is my duty to do the things I think are necessary to carry out our bylaws and protect our members." In the end, the committee decided to recommend only one department, one program for elimination. That was the math program. And I met with the math department, recommended they contact our assemblyman, Pete Lopez. Pete had a letter written to the president in about 2 or 3 days. Campus president got irate again. In the end, the program was not canceled. So that's what I will tell you in terms of understanding sometimes the difficulties. A chapter president, we don't have a lot of power. As UUP president, there is more institutional power. But what's important is to be able to understand that the tools that you have and how they can be used to keep the interests of the members first and foremost.
Thank you. Before we go to the next question, one protocol that the candidates have agreed to, and no one's violated that certainly, is that responses will be limited to 5 minutes each. Each candidate will have up to 5 minutes. Well, we expanded that up to 5 minutes.
That's fine.
Next question. Rob?
I'd like to ask a question about the LRSs. My concern is that increasingly, over time, the LRSs have been hired without any input from the chapters, and also in terms of their performance, we have no mechanism for providing input into that. At the same time, I see that the LRSs have become quite politicized. I'd like you to comment in terms of where you think the problems in regards to field services emanate from, and what kinds of strategies you would take to resolve those problems.
Wes went first last time. Fred.
Okay. Thanks, Rob. Labor relations specialists employed by NICET, our sister union, are crucial to the work that we do as chapter presidents, but also as a union in general. The LRS is an absolutely necessary component in dealing with issues like I've talked about in terms of, Maureen Seidel is our LRS, and when I heard about this committee being put together, she was the first one I called. What are our options? What can we do? When I faced the retrenchment fight back in the 90s, my LRS was there by my side helping me out. Now, having said that, I want to get directly to the point of your question. First is, it is my philosophy that the labor relations specialists work for us. Okay, that's both in the union sense, but also at the chapter sense as well. The relationship that I have seen change over the years, in the 90s, it was much more a case where chapter presidents had a great deal of latitude in deciding whether or not grievances would be filed, improper practice charges would be made, and the like. What I have seen over the last few years is that doesn't seem to be the case any longer. I mean, there won't be any denial. There's a couple members of my exec board here. It took us months to convince our LRS and the leadership in Albany that we needed to file an improper practice charge. That has got to change. We need to understand as a union that politics is about power. Going back to my days, when I was in research intern in grad school in Washington, D.C., working for the minority staff of the Senate Labor Committee, Senator Kennedy's staff at the time, early in the Reagan years. That's what I learned then for the first time. And then I relearned it again when I was in a negotiations team. This is all about power and the projection of power. There are times when that power has to be projected, even if, and we hear this a lot from NICE, well, that's a fight we might lose. You don't know unless you take on that fight. And I think we have been far too reticent in terms of filing grievances and improper practice charges. The second part of your question, or the second part of my answer to your question is, I think it's imperative that chapters have a say in evaluating and also in the hiring of LRSs. Like I said, they work for us. We pay a lot of dues to NICE. And you're catching me on a bad day with regard to NICE. NICE did extraordinarily well for its K-12 members and locals in the budget. We did terribly poorly. So I'm aggravated by that, I'm angry about it, and I wonder a bit, where's the payoff here? We're putting money into this system, and in terms of the LRSs, I would absolutely demand that we have say as an organization, chapter level and statewide, over who are the experts that we depend on to take on these fights, and that they serve the interests of the members, not, as you indicate, political interests that may not be in the best interest of our members.
Thank you, Wes.
Yeah, the question goes right to the heart of, when I say democratic culture. One of the things I learned when I was serving as the town supervisor in the county board of supervisors is that when I got there, I saw some very interesting problems that relate directly to what you're saying, in the sense of this sort of a wrong relationship between the elected representative and the hired experts. Okay, and in fact, if indeed democracy is to be representative, and it is to be, our offices are to be open to anyone in our community to come forward, then obviously the right relationship between that person and wherever that person goes to get their facts and to get their policies and get their information has to be, it's the lifeblood. Without that relationship doesn't work, then nothing works. I experienced lots of interesting ways in which politics would creep into that relationship when I was in government. Sometimes I would find that when elected officials would get a little nervous about a particular situation, they would tend to step back and defer to the staff person in public. I don't see this in UUP because I think our chapter presidents are pretty stand-up folks. But I have seen in government where people who were sort of afraid to face the public would kind of hide behind their department heads and their experts to do that. I think that's not the way to go. I think that when it comes to that relationship between what we decide to do in terms of policy and how we gather our expertise to make sure we get it right, there's a number of very, very, very important things in there. I think that sometimes, and I think we as an academic culture can sometimes be a little bit susceptible to this. In politics, there are 3 reasons that you do research, and 2 of them are nefarious. Okay, the good reason to do research is so you make sure that you get it right, and the bridge doesn't fall down, or our particular member who's being wronged in some particular way has a right way out of that situation. But sometimes we can also use the reliance on expertise to delay a decision that we're kind of afraid to make, and I think that people have to be encouraged and have the right relationship with their staff people, so they can feel courageous and move on a timely basis to make those sorts of decisions. I've also seen situations in politics where the experts were used to, in a sense, kind of justify a policy that was predetermined and pre-decided and prejudiced in putting forward. And that's a completely wrong use of staff. And I think that experience in government taught me a lot about the right ways to sort of set that relationship up and the real dangers of screwing it up. Because it can, not only result in direct harm to our individual members, it could also very easily result in direct harm to the organization as a whole.
Thank you. Next question. Gina?
Yes, could you tell us what your approach to relations with SUNY Central and the Chancellor's Office might be, and maybe a couple of priorities for those initial discussions?
Wes, you get that?
Sure, absolutely. I'll talk about Open SUNY, okay? And if anybody needs to get up to speed on Open SUNY, read the stuff that Rob put in the Sentinel. I think it's great stuff to get. I've been recommending it to people who are saying, what's going on with this thing? I think that's a really good example to take a look at how the relationship works. First of all, there are too many things that we ought to have in common for us to have a bad relationship with the chancellor. A good relationship doesn't mean we're subordinate, doesn't mean that we agree with everything. A good relationship means that we everything we can do together, we must do together. If you take a look at Open SUNY and the degree to which our union and our members were in a sense kind of left out of that process. And in one level, that's just absolutely nuts. Because if we're talking about how to best utilize technology to serve the goals of higher education, especially in UUP, we have the perfect partnership. We have professionals and we have academics working together. And in that partnership, which is absolutely essential to going forward. But if you take a look, I think one thing that's very important about that issue is that the technology issue as it's careening towards higher education is itself a tsunami. And I think that the chancellor is kind of riding along that wave. And I think that we can't just deal with the chancellor without dealing with the wave and seeing in a sense what's going in there. We really do need to get out in front of the innovations that are coming. And I think that one of the key, a couple of my key principles that were stated already in terms of it's very important that we not forget the fundamental importance of place in community, in terms of learning. But it's also important that when we look at these opportunities, my acid test for every one of them is, do they grow the pie or do they shrink the pie? And part of the problem is if you look at Open SUNY and you look at that series of initiatives that are all supposed to magically come into place so soon, you're subtracting place from each one of those. That means that once place has been removed as an issue, it's going to be easy to remove places. Okay, it's going to be easy to subtract campuses from the system because we're all the same anyway. This is the great misconception. I work just across the wall from our admissions people, and they spend all their time selling this wonderful, unique community of Geneseo. And it's so dissonant to see our chancellor out there describing a model that is so fundamentally divorced from what we have all come to know and why we do what we do in the places that we do. And so part of that, I think, is a very aggressive and robust engagement in this business of this very important conversation about telling people who we actually are. Because the other part about the Open SUNY, which I don't think the chancellor understands as well as she might, is that if this is all going to magically happen, it's all going to be magically done by somebody. And if people are going to be making $2 an hour designing and implementing online courses, there are going to be a whole lot of people rushing to sign up for that one. And I think that's really important part of the dialogue here, and I think that we have to convince the chancellor that, especially in these areas, we need to be a driving force in that conversation, if indeed it is to enjoy any kind of success whatsoever. My high school got its first ever paper punch card computer the year after I graduated. I'm 4 days older than Sputnik. I'm literally the last of the dinosaurs. And I bring a healthy skepticism to the technology question, but I also know that it's something that it's a reality we have to deal with. And if we don't drive it, we're going to be buried by it.
Thank you. Fred?
Thanks, Bill. This is a tough one. And I'm going to tell you why, and I'm also going to draw on the Open SUNY plan to respond. When asked, according to a SUNY press release, it was actually in an article in Higher Ed, and that we at Kowal got from our management, which I'll get back to in a second, which is kind of ironic. But it was touting the chancellor's plan for Open SUNY, and in it she was talking about MOOCs and about how wonderful it would be that students in SUNY would be able to take courses from scholars at Stanford and at Yale, and how wonderful it would be, because she said then SUNY students would be getting degrees that were more than just, quote, these are her words, degrees of convenience. That's how she characterizes the degrees we grant our students upon completion of their work. Degrees of convenience. There's an arrogance, there's a disdain for what SUNY has been, and it's troubling, it's baffling. It's troubling as well to hear Phil Smith say at delegate assemblies and at chapter presidents meetings and at the exec board that there aren't statewide labor management meetings because she refuses to meet. And the challenge, of course, is that she has the support of the governor in all of this. So we have this very challenging, I would say in my close to 30 years of work in SUNY, this is the worst it's ever been. Because we have an incredibly powerful governor and a chancellor who is doing his bidding and gets his support. Now, having said that, I think Open SUNY presents us with an opportunity to take the position that we are, as I said earlier in my opening statement, we're the stewards of the education process here in the State University of New York. What we need to do first, and it's an idea actually that Rob, you spoke to at the last delegate assembly, and Henry Steck mentioned as well. We need, once again, to provide a vision for the public, what we have for the future, what's our plan for the future of SUNY, so that, again, we're not responding in a passive way to what SUNY is putting out for their plan. Included in that is the reality that there are many, many faculty, professionals, and academics who are already teaching online courses. You're looking at one. I've been teaching online courses for 5 years. We have the chapter president here from Empire State. That has been a core purpose of Empire State for years. If you want to talk about best practices, quality control, these are the folks, the faculty at Empire State, at Kowal, at Albany, everywhere, because distance learning courses are being taught. And what we need to do is to take that message that we are the stewards of education and quality and go public with it. And I would say the worst mistake we could make as a union is to just unilaterally oppose distance learning for any reason whatsoever. For starters, we've got a college that's committed to this, and that's a central part of their mission, and they do it very well. But also, we have scholars, we have academicians who do this work. Now, in my 5 years of working on distance learning courses, I've encountered two problems. One is quality control, which is basically a joke. But the second thing is the workload on professionals. We've gone to labor management for the last 3 months to raise the issues of increased workload for professionals that will come about because of Open SUNY, and what the results will be for academics. Our administration at Kowal is clueless. They have no idea where this is going. The concern I just raised on Friday morning at 8 a.m. during our labor management meeting was there are real ramifications to this for campuses across the state of New York if they go ahead with it as planned. Now, to answer your question most directly, how do we deal with this chancellor? I think what we need to do is build the public relations campaign and the alliances with our legislators in order for them to make our case, but also the public to make our case. We're not opposed to online education. We're opposed to doing it wrong in a hell-bent fashion that will result in nothing but problems for our students and for the reputation of the State University of New York. She responds to power. There's no question about it. And I think that we need to project that kind of power. And to be honest, I don't think we have been for the last few years, and we need to do that. And I'm not saying, trash her in public, no. I'm saying that we go to our legislators, as we did, to talk about RAM, and she backed down. She understood how that power equation was working. And in all honesty, apparently, recently the chancellor has been willing to talk about some issues related to the health science centers, probably because she finds herself in a no-win situation. We need to be able to present ourselves as the stewards of education in public higher education in New York, and that we can provide the answers to these problems that we face, whether it's online, whether it's the budget, there's a whole host of issues.
Thank you, Fred. Next question. John, it looks like you're...
I'll put my head
Okay.
on. John. And this is for both of you, and I apologize if I take a little of your valuable time for a little background. But the tech sector, and Fred, you spoke to wanting chapters to be more collegial, to have more brotherhood amongst us than what we do, less divisiveness. And there's been a lot of it because of disparities in the past that still exist. Salary disparities that UUP didn't really help the tech sector with. We see a growth in contingent faculty to the point that they outnumber full-time faculty in the tech sector with our total numbers in our union. We see things in the contract that we see that strength being used, and it's starting to marginalize. We see revenues and we see efforts going to the health science centers, and I'm not denying that they need it, but it adds to this feeling of being stepchildren of the university. We see our degrees being attacked, our associate's degrees, our certificates being pushed aside. I see problems with New York's infrastructure in the future because of this. So on all those levels that, thank you for letting me speak to, what would you envision UUP's mission in the future to rectify these or help support us better?
Fred first.
Yep.
Thanks.
Specifically to the tech campus sector, right? That's where your question is coming from. Okay. First on the more, the narrow issue, and it's not narrow for us, obviously, right, and that is the salary inequities that exist. I was on a negotiations team in 99 and 2000, the contract for 99 and 2003. During that contract, we made, from the team, a very strong, I thought, well-reasoned, well-supported argument on behalf of the creation of a salary step system. And I was appointed, along with Ken Kowal from West Chapter at Geneseo, and Ken and I put together what we thought was an excellent proposal as to how we could set up a step system. And I learned a valuable and painful lesson when we presented to the state our proposal. I was warned that this is what they would say, and they did. They said, "Thank you very much, we're not interested." That is oftentimes the challenge of negotiating with the state of New York. Having said that, as the negotiations unfolded, we were getting towards the end, and a few of us considered the inequities that existed based on gender, based on campus type, based on upstate, downstate differential. There were a lot of different inequities. What we were able to put together was Appendix 31, and I've been noticing a lot of the communication going back and forth about the contract and about whether or not now there's any means of ever addressing inequities. Yeah, there is. It's Appendix 31. Appendix 31 was added to create, it calls upon, as all appendices do, it calls upon the state of New York and UUP within 6 months of the ratification of the contract to put together a joint committee to study the problem of salary inequities. So it's there. It's just a question of carrying it out. Also within that appendix, there was a little phrase added, my claim to fame from that contract. There's a little phrase that says, including campus type. And that was to ensure that we did get the one-time allocation in 2002 to address some of the salary inequities. It was a one-time shot. The appendix is in the tentative agreement, so it's there. It's a tool that can be used to deal with all sorts of inequities if the leadership of UUP is willing to do so, and I would be. Second, your question really gets at the greater issue of the budget, and I'm glad you asked it. I've been considering the political reality that we face, and what this all comes down to is, you know, as Wes says, making the pie larger. The difficulty is that there is such a deep-seated objection to any kind of increase in taxes that getting the increased revenue we need to fund programs is going to be really difficult. What we need to do is to utilize literally the brilliance of our own membership to come up with ways of generating revenue. In actuality, the president of AAUP has a proposal that I was just reading this morning that deals with the idea of a very slight tax on financial exchanges on Wall Street. It's an attempt to come up with a new way of raising revenue specifically targeted for higher education, right? Now, this is a federal idea, but could be also done at a state level. We need to think in new and different ways. It's a revenue issue, we've got to find the revenue. Or we build chapters that are so powerful so that we're like our sisters and brothers in the K-12 districts. We're never going to be at that same level. But think about it, if you're a legislator, you know you've got people who teach in the K-12 schools, and they've got their families and friends, and they will vote en masse. And so that's why the K-12 gets the money. We don't have it. We suffer from the worst of both worlds. We're a statewide union, and that seems to give us power, but there isn't a concentration of power at the district level that can be focused on particular legislators. What we have to do is build coalitions. Bill and I have already been talking about re-energizing the Upstate Mayors Coalition so that there's an interest, a political interest, in getting fuller funding for our universities and our colleges. That's the key. We need more revenue, and in order to get it, we need public support for that, new ways, innovative ways, that are not going to tax the working classes and the middle class. That's, public relations wise, that's just not going to happen. So we have to get new and innovative ways. Third, in terms of salary inequities, it's there, we will pursue it.
Thank you, Frank. Wes?
Yeah, one of the things that mystifies me about the question is kind of like, you take this thing over here that you hear, and this thing over there that you hear. If you take a look at what the chancellor seems to want for SUNY, you would wonder why she isn't throwing all of her money in the direction of the tech colleges, because she really has a very kind of job, very specific sort of job-oriented approach to this. And I think that one of the things I think is very important here is to connect our interests to the arguments that are already being made out there. Okay, one of the things is that I think that we're susceptible to sometimes is we make an argument that convinces us at the delegate assembly, and often those arguments are based upon some concept of justice. And trying to get, especially I know when new members come on the negotiating team, sometimes there's a little bit of a painful period that we all go through until we realize that the folks we're negotiating with don't care about justice. That's simply not that's not how they get employee of the month. They get employee of the month by the way these numbers move around. One of the things I think that was certainly true of the last contract, and we saw it manifested in I think what Fred was saying about the $28 million for downstate, is that there was this finite amount of money, and whatever was going to happen in that contract had to happen within this finite amount of money. So if we were going to do anything, we were going to have to take from one part of our organization and give to the other part of membership, and give to the other part of the membership, and that was the way it was going. This is unacceptable going into the future. And one of the things, of course, that amazes me is that going into the last contract, obviously one of the things that everyone was concerned about was the sort of impending collapse of Wall Street, and that was given as the great reason why we lost all this revenue, and then everyone had to suffer for it. Well, how's Wall Street doing? I don't understand why the argument worked differently then than it does now. And to a certain extent, when you're looking at the agenda that folks have out there in government, the agenda meaning to bring jobs and to build jobs, it seems to me we have a tremendous opportunity to leverage an argument for new resources for the tech colleges. I don't see, because in that sense, if that's going to become a kind of defining aspect of SUNY's identity, similar to Fred's comment about Empire State College, if you want to learn how to do distance learning, look at the people who are already doing it well. Look where you guys are already doing that. I think that part of it is extremely important in terms of interlocking that argument into the other part. As far as the disparity issues, I think that one of the things that is crucial to us there is that we do our own research, and once we claim that we're going to go forward on a research project, we give ourselves a date at the other end, and we complete that project and get that data in the tank so that it can be useful to craft a political strategy going forward. But I actually think that there's some great opportunities, specifically because your argument runs so closely congruent to what the stated goals are in terms of the kind of great programs that you guys offer. I think that is a real place for us to go to try to grow that pot.
Thank you, Wes. We have, believe it or not, we've been going an hour and 15 minutes, but we still have another 15 minutes. Next question.
I have one. You both have significant leadership experiences. I would like to know which specific leadership experience do you think would be most beneficial to the job of the statewide president?
That Wes?
Yeah, I think that, I think one of the things that you find out when you're president of an organization, and I've had a lot of executive experiences, when you're the executive, okay, when you're the person in charge, is that the more you learn about the job, the more you learn that your opinion really doesn't matter a whole lot, that you're there as a steward of a process, okay, that you have a vision and certainly you want to take the organization forward and that vision better be consonant with the vision of your members. And I think you're in a sense, the kind of the lead explainer and person who can focus the organization on that. I think a couple of things are very important. One of which is to reiterate the point about the right relationship between professional staff and elected staff, and getting that one down. And for me, that means keeping the professional staff of UUP completely as distant from the internal politics of the organization as possible, so they can give us absolutely good, solid, hard information and good work as best they can. I also think that the notion of having clear policies that are enforced in a transparent and consistent manner, I think that's absolutely essential to the members having confidence in what we do. I also think that a leader needs to invite dissent, needs to invite differing opinions. I'm a real Doris Kearns Goodwin team of rivals kind of guy. I want every opinion in the room. I don't mind if it gets a little hot from now and again. Democracy needs passionate people, and the more ideas you get in the room, the better off you are. At the end of the day, when you got to make a decision, there are very few decisions that you get to make in executive responsibility that are 0-100 decisions. You're making a lot of 48, 52 decisions, and when it comes time to make that call, you got to make that call. You got to be able to turn to the people who were disappointed in that decision, make the argument as best you can, but stand on your ground. I think that one of the most important skills, especially to be a leader of a union that contains a lot of people coming from an academic culture, is you need to strap on your Kevlar BVDs. You need to be able to take it, okay? That is to say, sometimes people are going to be passionate about what they believe, and they're going to maybe perhaps go over the top, say things that they shouldn't say, and you need to be able to listen to that in the same way that you listen to your best friend talking to you. You need to be able to kind of detach yourself enough from that emotion to do that. On the other hand, you as the leader need to set a tone which says that you know, the rhetoric of personal attack, however much someone in a moment of passion believes that that's the right thing to do, really just simply distracts from the facts of the matter. It's a distraction from what you really need to talk about to get the job done. And so we're always, in democratic institutions, we're always kind of caught between the inevitable kind of stuff that spills over that gets interpreted as personal attack or is intended that way, and stuff, and that's bad for democracy, and the stuff which, that sort of passionate debate that really produces the best decisions that you can possibly have. Pulling all of that together, I still think the #1 job of the president of UUP is to represent our membership in the public sector, in the debate about who we are and why we matter and what our agenda is. And that person has to be out there all the time. Our members, I know, on my campus are always looking to see where the president of UUP is in the article on the banner of the Democrat and Chronicle, if it's about state funding, or on the television, in the media, whatever. I think that the president has to have a sort of good sense of media savvy to be able to craft those kinds of arguments and know how to use those organs, not only to put our case forward to the public in a convincing way, but to let our own members know that you know, you don't call the charge unless you're willing to ride the first horse.
Thank you. Rick?
I have to leave. I apologize. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. I should never have committed myself to being someplace else this early.
I'm sorry. Well, goodbye, Fred, but
And for the rest of you, go to hell.
Your time.
Even though he's Fred.
That's right.
ZJ, I'm going to cheat a little bit. You said the one experience that you would draw from as a leader. I'm going to mention 3 experiences because they're that central to me, and then the end one is the most important, I think. First is, Bill Simon and I and Eric Burke, we went out to Youngstown, Ohio to knock on doors for Barack Obama just a few months ago. And then I went out another weekend. It's a particularly humbling experience to do grassroots work, to try to convince people who otherwise may not be motivated to participate or to vote, to listen to you. And it was tough work, but it was incredibly rewarding, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. That's also, it's part and parcel with a lot of the different things I've done in my life in terms of grassroots organizing. It's tough, it's rewarding, but more importantly, if the progressive movement in this country, if this union is going to grow, that's where the strength must come from. And so the passion that I have for wanting to help define the future of this union as its president is reflected in that kind of work, going out to Youngstown. Second, when I was out on the Flathead Indian Reservation in the late 1980s, mid-1980s, we were running my wife at the time and I were running a nonprofit business. And you know, for those of you who know anything about Indian reservations in the West, these are some of the poorest places in the country. And to run a nonprofit business hiring developmentally disabled people is a tough gig. And we had to make day in and day out choices about resources, really tough decisions. My approach in running what was called the Folk Shop, and it still is, it's still there in St. Ignatius, Montana, was to expand, was to be aggressive and move into new communities to serve their needs in the hopes that we would generate more support for the work that we were doing. And it worked. More importantly, I forged some of the most important friendships of my life that really pretty much define who I am as a person. Third, though, is what is the most important role I've had in defining my leadership style and so forth is chapter president. When you're chapter president, on your campus representing UUP, the buck stops with you. If there's a member who is not reappointed, as the manager of our farm was not reappointed last year and had done a damn good job as farm manager. We went through all the appeals process. He's a tough farm guy, and he was in tears in my office. And when he went through the entire appeals process, and I had to tell him there was nothing else we could do, there was nobody else on that campus who could tell him that with the same level of sympathy, obviously. But my response to that also was, again, to think there's got to be a solution to his dilemma. What I did was, following up my meeting with him, was to open a discussion with our vice president for administration. And we talked, we negotiated, we bargained, we cajoled. I brought Tom, the name of the, Tom Boltinsky, he's the farm manager. I brought him into the meeting with the vice president. He told his story with passion, with tears, with evidence of the good work he had done. And eventually, a couple months later, there was an agreement such that Tom was given a new position at the college, still farm manager, but slightly restructured. And he came to see me, and he said, you know, Fred, I've never been a union guy. And he said, but now I understand. He said, what can I do? And I handed him a membership card, because he was a fee payer. And he signed it, and he said, wow. I said, that's great. What else can I do? Well, he's on our professional concerns committee now, and he's an area representative, and he's an activist in the union. And to me, that's what matters the most. The buck stops with us, but also there are endless opportunities to build the organization as a chapter president, and it's the best thing that I've ever done.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Jay, and then Rob.
One thing that I think is unique with the two of you candidates is you both have experience as adjuncts. What's that going to bring to the union in the years as president? What does your awareness of adjunct issues bring to the position?
Yeah, I think first, there's full-time faculty can never understand the situation that our academic part-timers face. You know, you're not included, for the most part, in department meetings. You don't have office space. Your office is your car and all those kinds of things. And the support structure isn't there. You're on your own so much of the time. Because, by the way, because of my experience as an adjunct, when I was serving as a department chair, which I was doing after I left statewide service in 2002, I carried with me that awareness of what it means to be an adjunct. And one of the guys I hired is sitting over there, Eric Burke. And at a certain point in time, our administration violated the contract when it came to Eric's position and another adjunct that I'd hired. They canceled their classes 3 days before they started, and they had worked long enough so that they were supposed to get a 45-day notification. Frustrating. I told them, file a grievance. You've got a perfect case, and because of their fears that in the future they wouldn't be able to get a position, they chose not to. This new agreement, if it's ratified, provides the union the opportunity to file class action grievances. That would protect adjuncts who wish to file a grievance, those who are the most vulnerable of our members, and those are our part-time contingents. The class action grievance clause, to me, is absolutely crucial. Second is, as I mentioned in passing during my statement, one of the things that I would do is, one of the first things is to authorize chapter presidents across the state, after training and working with them at regional meetings, to negotiate with every campus president so that we can raise the salaries that adjuncts are paid. I raised that last Friday at our labor management meeting. You know what their response was? The response was, well, your adjuncts get $42 more than the adjuncts at Delhi, implying they should be happy with that, right? They're shared services for it. Nonetheless, as a UUP president, I would make it clear that every campus president, and word would get around pretty fast, that every campus president was hearing from their chapter presidents at labor management. We have been authorized to open negotiations on salary minimum for our adjuncts, and that across the board effort would send a very strong message that this is going to be a priority, and it would be for me. The other thing is we need to join with organizations like the New Faculty Majority and some of the efforts that AAUP are doing on behalf of our contingent folks, particularly the part-timers. We need to be front and center. You know, we asked AFT to testify at hearings that will be held on April 23rd, next Tuesday. IRS is holding hearings governing what is a part-timer under the Affordable Care Act, who will be eligible for health insurance, what's the cutoff point. I was extremely disappointed to hear that AFT will not be testifying. I was more disappointed that UUP won't be testifying. We should be there. Now, I know we're protected under our contract for now, but there's no guarantee that's going to stay there, besides the fact we're engaged in a nationwide workers' movement. There are part-timers elsewhere that are in real trouble, and we need to stand with them as well. It sends a strong message. This is an issue throughout this country, and as you said, it is bad in SUNY, and it's got to be a priority, and it would be for me.
Thank you. Wes?
Yeah, then a person gets too worked up about you know, what folks, what kind of words folks use. But one time I did correct somebody when I was referred to as a part-time person. You know, I didn't say that I should do my person with full-time, part-time at college, and enjoy that work. And that work has always been a part of my quality of life. I think that you know one thing I would really bring to that conversation, aside from the obvious notion of having walked the walk, and have managed to hang around for the better part of 3 decades in a place where the job security arrangement is that I can be washed off with the next wave. One thing that's really important is to recognize the diversity of folks out in the part-time world. And when I say part-time, I really do specifically mean even among our contingents, the people who are part-time as opposed to full-time. That there's a lot of different kinds of people out there. And part of, one of the things that happens in the very legitimate justice arguments that we make on behalf of our part-timers is that sometimes we lose the resource of the part-timers. That is to say, there was one time I was at a meeting about, or a representative had come in from SUNY Central to talk to us about making private sector partnerships in the community and public sector partnerships in the community. This wonderful presentation, like it all's going to happen, and it was great. And he opened up for questions, and I said, why did you talk about the single greatest ongoing collaboration that goes on between each of our SUNY campuses and the local communities? And that is folks who work for us part-time but have careers and other kinds of responsibilities out in the community, where that's a natural bridge and a natural resource, which does a lot concern to connect our colleges up with internship opportunities and all kinds of things that benefit our students. But also then those people are out themselves often in, you can find them in political positions, sometimes they're lawyers, and those are the folks that, we don't really, I guess, sometimes want to notice, because we're so concerned about the folks that are on the other end of the scale and are living in their cars and suffering greatly, but that we have leverage with these other folks to get them involved and to make sure that they're invested in the workforce that they're a part of. I've had some really good and interesting and important conversations with people that way, and those folks have sometimes come through and really been big dogs in the yard for us when we needed them. So respecting the diversity out there, I think, is extremely important. Now, in negotiations, when one of the things that the last three teams have heard, including this team, by the way, I think that this team should be really recognized for the really important stuff for part-timers that ended up in this contract, and I think that was a really good piece of work. One of the things we hear always from the state is there's no local impediment to improving the life of part-timers. We're not going to do a statewide minimum. There's no local impediment. That's a mantra that comes back. And so what we always have to do then is we have to go to all of our campuses, gather the data about the actual impediments, because there are actual impediments on the local campuses to do that, and bring them back. One of the things about that situation is the state, at the statewide level, they really don't want to go statewide minimum because it's for them a management control issue, okay? They feel like they're surrendering management control at the local campuses. And so they actually really don't want to be bothered by that question coming back, which means that we have to come back with it every time hard in negotiations, even when they say no, so that we can then in turn go back and leverage that on the local campuses and say, hey, well, they told us in Albany that there's no obstacle here to raising these salaries and to improving job security, that these are all decisions that can be made here. I think that we don't ever take our eye off the ball of the statewide minimum, because I think that is absolutely essential. Once it's established, wherever it's established, then we can keep negotiating it up. But in the meantime, we have to keep up the pressure on it so that we can leverage it against these discussions that are happening at individual campuses. And many campuses have had, I think, some really made some great progress. No one's making a lot of money yet, but certainly there's some upward pressure on those salaries.
Can I just ask a brief follow-up to that? That's excellent statements, but what do we do with the Little League democracy inside the union? Mm-hmm. How do we get the UUP drawing in contingents, and how do we get UUP at chapter levels acting on behalf and in protection of contingents?
Sure. Nothing succeeds like success. And she wouldn't mind me saying this on camera. My wife has lupus, okay, and for a fair share of our lives, our health insurance came from the two courses that I taught every summer for SUNY Geneseo. I look back on our own personal economic position to be a little different right now if we hadn't had access to that health insurance, and therefore you got me for life. Okay, I will always show up on behalf of the part-timers, and there was a direct and immediate benefit there. I think that we need to win victories, and the more we win victories, the easier and more convincing it's going to be to bring those members into full participation.
Yeah, I would say first, I think it was a major step at the last DA that the Constitution was amended so that there will be contingent representation at the delegate assembly from every chapter, a specific delegate who is there representing our contingents. My preference is that that person be a contingent. Furthermore, I think it would behoove us as an organization that be an academic working part-time or a professional working part-time. And that's why I encourage Eric to run for our contingent representative position, and he was elected. That's the first step, and I was proud of the fact that the Cobleskill chapter joined the other chapters in proposing that amendment and working for its passage, which occurred. The other thing is that this is where the idea that I think is very crucial is the regional meetings for the UUP president to sit down with chapter presidents and basically say, this is a union priority, and here's how we're going to do it. This also gets back to Rob's question about the LRSs, that if I were president of UUP, I would instruct the LRSs that this will always be a priority, and we will follow up on it. That may mean, as your question indicates, some difficulty and some resistance. We're educators, we need to overcome that resistance, but it is a huge issue because on some campuses, really, there is a serious opposition to dealing with contingent issues. So that has to be dealt with.
Thank you. If I might, with the audience's indulgence, a final question that maybe enables you both to summarize concisely, and that is, what do you each see as the chief strength of your opponent? And two, what distinguishes you from your opponent? And Fred?
Thanks. I can do the first part. Well, for starters, what to me is most admirable and positive about Wes is, aside from the fact that he must know where all the best places for wine and you've got to. More importantly, I'm fascinated by the career that you have had and the diversity that you have shown in terms of the matching, the hybrid role that you mentioned. And I will avoid any cracks about the mule.
I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, because then I can make some my own, tell you some stories about me and bears in Montana, but I don't want to get into those. No, and I think also that with your experience in the private sector and the public sector, those would be tools that, were I to be elected president, I would not only welcome the opportunity to discuss with you your ideas for building our union, I would give you a role in working with me because I think that's crucial. In two ways. One is that we need to get past the divisiveness that has occurred far too often in political campaigns in this union. And we don't even need to talk about that except to say, and I believe you to your word, that this is something we're going to avoid. And we're going to have a good campaign, and it's underway already. Second, what I think differentiates me from Wes is the long time that I have served as a chapter president and had to make those difficult decisions, taken on those fights. I'll never forget the lonely walk to the union office after a faculty meeting, after I had been accosted. The faculty meeting, I announced to the president that his plan to retrench was unacceptable. And as I walked back, I was accosted by a senior faculty member who told me, those people who are retrenched, too bad, let them go. You've got to defend the rest of our jobs. And that was the good part of the message he gave me that I can repeat to you. It's a difficult position, it's a lonely position, and it is I think, at the same, I said before, it's rewarding, but it is difficult, and maybe that's why it's tough to find really good chapter presidents. I think I'm still learning after 12 years to get this thing right.
Wes?
Yeah, I actually have a long and distinguished history of ending up being good friends with people I run against for public office. And I really sense that that's coming. I know Fred very well before we got into this. One of the things in terms of the similarities is just in terms of life experience. Several times today Fred has said something and said, wait, I thought that was me. That in terms of the service learning stuff that we've done in Haiti and Nicaragua and in Appalachia and stuff, I think we share a lot of common experience there out where that the rubber really meets the road in terms of people in absolutely the most dire situations of poverty and injustice. And I think that having shared that experience, that's a great binder together of people. I mean, that kind of thing is something that gives people some really sort of fundamental values to share in this. And the fact that I think in different ways we each got some serious skin in the game in terms of SUNY and the union business. I think Fred comes from a union family and respects, and I think that that's such an important thing to be able to remind us all sometimes where we come from and who we're attached to, and we get afraid. I remember in the old days they used to hit us with 2x4s. So let's, I think we need to connect to that part of the experience. And in my own sense, as I mentioned in my candidate statement, SUNY's been a family project for me. Everybody in my family has a SUNY degree, including the next generation that's going forward there. In terms of differences, I think it comes in to play right off of Fred's comment in the sense that my executive experience comes from off campus, in which the government experience, but also in the private sector. And one of the things that this sort of strange hybridization, bicultural nature, when I go across the valley to the other side of the valley from Geneseo to the town of York where I grew up, I go into the Barn Restaurant. Trust me, it's called the Barn Restaurant. And all the old colleges there look at me and say, "Oh, here comes Wes, the Oneonta College professor, ran off to Geneseo." In my town, running off constitutes running off to Geneseo, 7 miles away. But sometimes when I'm on campus, I think that my colleagues think I'm Larry the Cable Guy. Okay, because I really am kind of bicultural. I'm very, very comfortable walking off campus into the local political ambiance and talking to people and knowing what their arguments are. And I think that as a reader of literature, however medieval it may be, one of the things that it really sort of helps and trains us to do is to completely get out of our head and see an argument coming from the other side and see what that person is thinking, what their objective is, and what they're really looking for, and to be able to kind of listen to the otherness of that argument, especially in terms, particularly the people that we need to convince to be on our side. And I think that I'd like to thank Oneonta, and I'm particularly struck at our conversations coming to this event, Bill, the way your commitment was to make sure that we as candidates get to know each other and have the kind of debate that the union can be proud of and that can help heal and bind the union together after the election. I want to thank you for that role in that, your chapter. Thank you.
If I might, in bringing the proceedings to a close, I want to thank the candidates, but I want to thank the audience as well for the content and the tenor of this exchange. And I think that the way in which this was conducted, whatever the result of this election is, that it will make for a better union. I wonder if we collectively could thank both candidates. And I think both candidates are available for informal discussion.
Absolutely.
Who's going to do the CBS exit poll?